See, we're missing Sheila and Chris Bonowitz. And any other council member. I don't know if any other council. Anyway, it is 1 o'clock. I guess we can start. I hear Chris Bonowitz walking in the door. No, it's not.
That's not that way.
No, it's not it's a workshop, more or less. There's no, hey, Chris. How you doing? I take you off the golf course. You can still get in 9 afterwards.
Okay, y'all look at this and see if I need to move it back any farther, or you think? Or
Yep.
what he, hello, how are you?
Hey, Sheila.
This way?
Hey, how are you doing?
She saw it. She forgot to get you before you came over there.
Don't listen to him.
Right now. We're just about to start it. And not yet, but we're about to, huh? In the chamber room.
My pelvis acting up.
Okay,
Yeah.
Chris, you weren't here, but
Okay.
this is
Yeah, that's fine.
just
You're okay.
being
All right.
recorded so that we can watch it later. So it's on, so you're in the corner of there, you're out of
You'll get
sight.
your royalty check later.
You're out of sight.
Anyway, Sheila will be here in a moment. I'm going to start. Thanks to everybody for coming in. I know I'm taking time, but I think this is a worthwhile project. Morris comes from many years, 20-30 years experience in planning and zoning. So he's no rookie. Bureau Veritas, we just kind of got into an agreement with them over the last few months, I guess. And they're proven time and time again that the people that represent them, they're all professionals. They've got years and years of experience. I think that's all they hire. I mean, it's people that have a huge background.
And a lot of gray hair.
And a lot of gray hair. But I felt this was needed because for many years, we had no kind of training classes or anything. And when we hooked up with Bureau Veritas, it started opening my eyes and ears. Hey, we could use something like this. Actually, I kind of anticipate maybe another one or two, but depends on what he covers and what kind of questions we got and how everybody feels. So what we'll do today's class, and in a week or two, maybe the next meeting of our, whether it be P&Z or council, we'll find out, where the remaining questions lie, and do we need to have another one that focuses on a particular subject concerning planning and zoning. So I guess, Morris, if you want to go ahead and kick it off, go ahead.
I'll do that. Now, the mayor said I have about 6 hours. Buckle up. But, how many P&Z members do we have here? You can raise your hands. We got 3, 4, 5. Good. Council members? 3. Very good. And just citizens? Staff? Who's staff? Okay. Well, very good. Well, this is a wide range of groups, and I'm just going to give you an overview of what planning is, what you can and can't do. But first of all, I want to, because I don't really know, your backgrounds or what you know about the city. So I just have a couple slides that I put together. I put together a little map of West Tawakoni. The area in green that you see is inside the city limits. And this is critical for some of the discussions we're going to have later. But there's another area that surrounds the city that's in blue, which is your extraterritorial jurisdiction. And everybody says ETJ. And so within this, back up one slide here real quick. Within the city limits, there's approximately 1,815 people that live in there, and it's approximately 2.9 square miles. Now, within the ETJ, there is 4,690 acres, and this is an area that's half-mile aura around the city, and it's an automatic. If the city would annex a piece of property, the ETJ would also expand. The ETJ is determined by the size of the city. When you get to the population of 5,000, that ETJ will extend to 1 mile. The biggest ETJ that you can have is 5 miles. So you have the Fort Worths, the Dentons, the Dallases, they all have a 5 mile. The ones that are in between, there's a 2.5 mile, like the Shermans, they would have, and the Greenvilles, they'll have a 2.5 mile ETJ. Now, it's important to know this area because the city can actually extend their subdivision rules and regulations into that blue area. But within the green area is the only area that you can have zoning. That's the only place you can have land use control. But in the blue, you extend your subdivision rules and regulations, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But there's a whole bunch of criteria that you can and cannot do, as well as in the zoning ordinance. But both of these together would be considered your planning area, because the P&Z and the city council has somewhat control in that area for different purposes. Within the green, you have land use control, and you also have subdivision control. And in both of those areas together, you have subdivision control. So it's a little bit different, but it's very important to know that. The total planning area is 10.2 square miles that you have jurisdiction. I want to start off by talking a little bit about ethics and procedures. And a lot of this is based upon state law. But, you know, when you come to a meeting, you need to have an open mind about what's being presented. And, you know, you need, see both the strengths and the weaknesses of a case. So try not to come in with perceived notations of what's going to happen and what you're going to be voting on. Because just the presentation by an individual, or the interaction among the commissions, or if it's at the council level between the council, may change your mind. So come in with an open mind, willing to work, and take in all the facts. And there's some general criteria that I've spelled out. This is in your handout, and I won't go over every point, but it's something to look at down the road. You know what you need to be doing as far as a commission. Conducting a meeting. Are generally the ways that cities do this, and it's pretty uniform. You know, you start, you have the invocation and pledge, and then a lot of times you give items of community interest. There may be something that's coming up. If there's people in the audience that may not know, it's a good time to let them know what's happening. And then you have a consideration for approval of the minutes from the last meeting, and then you go into public hearings and action items. And normally what cities do is they have their planning and zoning commission and their city councils use Robert's Rules of Order. And it makes it pretty straightforward. You listen to the presentations, and what you do a lot of time in the presentations, you have the people that are for something, give a presentation, or if you have staff, they might give a presentation before that. And then the opposition has a chance to speak, and then a lot of times there's a rebuttal. If there's something that they brought up and it may be something that's actually not true, it gives the people that are on the other side, on the proponent side, to come back and give a rebuttal, say, well, what he said wasn't quite actually right, and we want to clarify something. And then after that, the public hearing is closed, and then the chair asks for a motion. And if there's a motion, at that point, after a second, then you discuss. Or you can do something more. You can actually insert the thing in there before the motion. You actually debate it a little bit, and then there's a motion, and then there's an action to second it, and then you debate. Now, if there's not a second, then the chairman of the commission, is the chairman here, by the way? Okay, he would say the motion fails for lack of a second. And then you discuss some more. And finally, hopefully somebody else come up with a motion, and then there'll be a second, then you discuss that. And if there's a second, then motion, and after all the discussion ends, then you'll take a vote. The chairman will call for a vote on the matter. Then it'll pass or fail. There's another thing that's very important. I just wanted to bring this out, and this is in your government code, and it's also in your handout. There are some rules. If you're heavily involved in a piece of property, you have a financial interest, or you have a relative that's like a wife or a son or child that's in it, you really shouldn't be debating the situation. And you should actually get up and leave the room while that public hearing and also the motion and the action is taking place. You know, so you don't put any undue influence on the body, whether it's P&Z or the city council. And that's very important. And they're all spelled out. Like I said, this is in local government code. It's nothing I've made up. It's nothing the city made up. It's state law. This is the way you should be handled. And this is the way it looks like. There's other ethical considerations that you should do. You know, a lot of people, you know, outside of the meeting want to come to you and talk to you about a lot of different things. But you know, there's a real downside to that. You know, they're giving one point of view, you're getting information that the whole commission is getting or the city council is not getting. And it's best to have all that stuff, you know, flushed out in a meeting so that there can be some back and forth. So somebody says, well, I didn't know that. Well, the reason why you didn't know it, you weren't in this special little meeting where they talked about it. It needs to be all, you know, in the open. The only group that really has a time where they can talk behind doors in executive session is the council. You know, if they have, and there's usually about 3 different things, you know, if there's property negotiation or if there's a personnel issues and those types of things, where you can go, or you need consultation with your attorney, you can go behind closed doors and do that because that's not open to the general public. But the P&Z, everything should be out in the open. All the discussions, the discussions and the actions and everything should take place at the meeting. There's another number 2 up here. It talks about serial meetings. Serial meetings is something where, you know, I have a commissioner and he's talking to this commissioner, that commissioner, and another commissioner, and all of a sudden they're copying and talking about it. Well, that's not really due process because there's a lot of people in the proponent and maybe the opposition don't have a chance to interface with that. And try to avoid that in all possibilities. Also, I put on there the last thing, do not use a reply all. You know, because if you are, you're holding a meeting without the benefit of having a meeting. And that's not really looked upon very kindly under state law. Also, exchanging votes is something that is pretty much a no-no. If you vote for this case of mine, you know, I'll vote for yours. You know, that's something that you shouldn't have any of that kind of take at all. You know, a case should stand on its own merit. If it can't stand on its own merit with any kind of spatial favors, then you probably shouldn't approve it. Civility. People are people, and they're going to have difference of opinions about every different issue. I don't care what it is, but be civil to each other. Don't you know, start calling names and pointing people out. Well, you did this, you did that. You know, that just leads to no good. You know, try to keep it ordered. And if somebody starts doing that in a meeting, hit that gavel and say, please refrain from doing that. If you have a question, you know, refer them to me, and we'll take care of it. The also thing I want to warn you about as a commission and a council is little sidebar conversations. Say we're holding a public hearing and everybody's up there and somebody makes it, and all of a sudden there's a couple of commissioners on this side of the table or they start whispering to each other, stuff like that. Don't do that. You know, if you have a question or something, refer it to the chairman or the mayor and discuss it openly. Don't have the little sidebar conversations. Zoning. Zoning is something that's been upheld through the courts. It really started in 1926 with the city of Euclid, actually the village of Euclid versus Ohio versus Ambula Realty. And basically it said zoning can be done, and it's been upheld through the federal courts. So you can do zoning. You can do lots of different things with that. And it's also been upheld in Texas through a Supreme Court action. Once again, this is the only area where you can have zoning. It's inside the city limits. The zoning ordinance is supposed to be in compliance with comprehensive plan. And the comprehensive plan is a document that the city should have or have in place that usually updates every 5 to 10 years. Just, it sort of builds a roadmap where the city wants to go in the future. You know, it takes a look at the existing conditions and then it projects out, other, ways you want to go, whether it's new thoroughfares or different land uses. So like I say, that things change over the course of time. And so you need to take a look at it. But, it's designed to lessen congestion, and make sure you have all the appropriate community facilities that you need, and also the arrangement of future land uses. But this document is not the law. The law is actually the zoning ordinance. The comprehensive plan, and it's under state law, it's required to have a little statement on it that says this comprehensive plan is not zoning, does not constitute zoning, and so don't treat it as such, in so many words. Now, under section 211, this is in the local government code, and we're going to be talking about several different things in the local government code. We're going to talk about section 212, 211. 212 is subdivision ordinances, and 211 is zoning. Everything you wanted to know about zoning or don't want to know about zoning can be found in local government code in those 2 chapters. So you can download that from the internet, the whole local government code, and look for those 2 chapters, because that basically spells out everything you need to know about it as far as when public hearings are held, what you can and can't do. But under section 211.003, it spells out what you can do in the zoning ordinance, what you can control. In your zoning ordinance, you have these categories from agricultural district, and when property is annexed into the city, it comes in as agricultural, which is considered a temporary zone. And then you have all these permanent zones. And there's one down here at the bottom called PD. And that's one that I really want to talk about just a little bit. It's a section of the ordinance which allows some flexibility in development. And under the planned development district, you pick a district that is similar to it, and then you can vary it from it. And once you actually establish all the different uses in that district, the setbacks, lot sizes, etc., you can approve that. And then when something comes in, then it has to meet those standards. And they don't have to line up with any of the standards that you have in any of these districts. And so it's really a tool. Yes.
Hey, while you're on the subject of ag and the different zoning district names, on agricultural, isn't changing that from agricultural to say SF1 or SF4, isn't there rollback taxes where you do that goes back so many 5 years or 3 years or something like that?
Taxes are not supposed to be related to zoning. It's related to the use of the property.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Well, the zoning does not constitute a use. It pretty much constitutes the rules for that piece of property.
Okay.
The districts. But these are all the different districts that you can have under your current ordinance. And hopefully down the road, we're going to actually massage those. I've reviewed the ordinance here, and there's some suggestions that I do have for it. And some of these districts may change drastically if I would have my way. But once again, I just want to say I'm not, I don't live here. And so all I can do is recommend. And it's up to the Planning and Zoning Commission and the City Council to make the final decisions. But I do think you need to make some changes. Some of the ordinances are rather dated, and every couple of years, state laws change. And, if you don't keep at this, it really becomes out of date after a while. Just
why we got you guys here.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
I'll let you look at my book. I read through this, and I got my red marker out, and I said, I've got some things I really, really, really want you to change.
How many markers did you go through?
2. So they were lifetime pins. But this is found in your current ordinance. Those are the districts you have to work with. And this is another chart out of your ordinance which specifies which district that you can do specific things in. I have some problems with the chart, but I'm not really gonna get into that today, but this is what you're working with now. So if somebody comes in, the first thing, the front desk is gonna say, if they wanna do something is, first of all, where are you located? What's your zoning? What you wanna do and what zoning classification currently is there. And then they can direct you, you need a zoning change, or you need to do something else, or it's allowed in here with these certain modifications. Well, you can look at this and help make those decisions. You also have different standards in your zoning ordinance where you have different lots. You have front yards, side yards adjacent to the streets, and your rear yards. And there's standards for each one of these. This is just one picture out of your zoning ordinance. I want to change some of these things too. We'll get to that down the road. This is basically the areas that you have on a lot. You have the front yard here. You have a side yard adjacent to a street. You have a side yard not adjacent to a street. You have the rear yard. And one of the things that's not included in your ordinance, it's very vague. It says you need to have something, but normally a city will have a 25 by 25 visibility clip at the corner. So when somebody comes up that corner, they can see around. That doesn't mean you can't put anything there. But normally, bushes and shrubs have to be no more than 3.5 feet, tall, just to make sure it's a safety issue. Those are some of the kind of things that you might look at a building site. Also in your,
You said that picture is in our ordinance book,
this
that previous picture?
this picture is not, but those pictures are.
Those are,
Yeah.
okay.
Also in your ordinance book, it calls out different densities for different size, for different land use categories, different districts. And so I've got 3 exhibits here of 3 different lot sizes and what you can do on it. It ranges on some of your districts. It says between 2 and 4 units per acre. But what really does that mean? You have some of those where the lot size 2 to 4, lots per acre, but and you can only do 12,000 square foot lots. Well, you can see you can do a lot of lots in there. Those won't quite meet the 4,000, but that would, and then of course, this is based on a perfect scenario. And if you have 4 units per acre, those lot sizes start to come down. And you have 5, you even come down more. So when somebody, and in your ordinance, it says you can do between 5 and 7 units per acre. That's how many lots you can get on like 2 acres of land. So you can actually start getting a lot of lots in a perfect scenario. I'm gonna give you a test now. And this is just sort of an educational type thing. And my question is, this is a lot, it's a residential lot, it's got 1 unit in the middle of it. So what kind of what project is this? What would you call it?
That's your setbacks.
That'd be a single family residential. I'll give you the answer to the first one, single family. We're looking at uses, single family. Here you have 2 different separate units on 1 lot.
Multiple family.
It's not multi-family.
It's if 2.
It says
Second
two.
single family.
No, this is a duplex.
Oh, that's one.
The definition of a duplex is 2 units on 1 lot.
Now, the units don't have to touch.
They don't have to touch, it's still a duplex. Okay?
What consists of a unit? How is that? What's
One, one family unit, one family living unit.
Is there a certain amount of square feet? or
No,
a certain
no,
amount
this has nothing to do with square feet. Now, in your ordinance deals with square feet, how big they have to be. But this is just by definition, this is a duplex.
So
Wow.
if you have a single family home and you have on a lot, whether we allow it in the city or not, a grandma pod, which is
Wait just a second.
is that.
That's what I'm interested in as well.
What is this?
It's still a duplex, isn't it?
No, it's not,
No.
it's not a duplex.
What do we call that?
It's a single family house.
Yeah.
Okay, but the trick of this is if you approve something like this, that unit back there says mother-in-law on it can never be lived in by another family.
So you can't rent it.
You can't rent it out. It's like, you can rent it to your mother-in-law, but you can't rent it out to another family like a duplex. Okay, so you gotta be real careful. If somebody says, I want to build this here, you need to tell them up front, you can't rent that unit out.
That'd be hard to govern or keep up with.
Yeah, but you're talking for single family only. If it was commercial, it would be different, right?
Would be that
Yeah.
on that
Yeah.
Kind of
particular
like above
large.
garage apartments.
And what's this? 2 units, duplex, 2 units on 1 lot. Now, these are attached, same as 2 separate ones, but that's a duplex.
So, pardon me, I grew up in a town that, and I know that parts of the city of Dallas had these where they were single family homes and they had a freestanding garage. That the garage had a garage apartment above. What's that? And they rented it to somebody that wasn't
It's a duplex.
necessarily
2
a
units,
relation.
2 units on 1 lot is a duplex.
Okay,
Okay.
okay.
Whether it's together or not.
And if
So when
it's
somebody-
a house or an apartment above a garage, it's still a unit.
So when somebody walks in the front door here and they say, I want to build this, I have an existing house, and I want to build this unit in the back with an apartment on top of it.
They need to be able to.
You need to have some justification, and should be some questions that are asked. Is there plumbing in it? You know, is there restroom facilities in it? Is there a kitchen in it? All of a sudden, you're gonna say, well, I'm sorry, but you can't do that because you're building a duplex in a single family neighborhood.
Yeah, you're not zoned for that.
You're not zoned for that. So don't do it. Now, if it's a mother-in-law that you put above your garage, that's a different deal. But once again, she passes away or, you know, she moves out or something else, you can use that, you know, area for storage, but you can't bring another renter in. So you gotta be real careful with those situations.
Get you another mother-in-law.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a possibility too.
Bring the kids out.
3 units on 1 lot,
Multifamily.
multifamily, very good. And some might call it a triplex, but it's still multifamily. 1 unit, but it's not in the middle of the lot, it's all the way to the side.
Single family on a 0 lot line?
It's a 0 lot line, and there's another name for it, garden homes.
Yeah.
So either one, which has some real merit, especially when you have a small lot subdivision. You have a lot of small lot in your ordinance, a lot of areas where small lots can be built. In this particular instance, what you can do is actually, it gives people a bigger area on the side of your yard to have a little, what they call it, a garden home. They have a little walled-in garden area, sitting areas. That's bigger because a lot of times, you know, you'll have 5 to 10 foot on a side yard. Well, that's not big enough to do anything. So if you push your house all the way over to one side, it gives you more flexibility what you can do. But there are other requirements that go along with that. One of them would be, you know, on this side over here, there can't be any windows. And normally on your property, next door neighbor's property, there's an easement in case you need to get out and work on your house. There's a maintenance easement that goes along that side so you can get over there and work on it. And then likewise, there's no windows on the house that'd be over here looking, and the reason why they'd be looking into your garden, or I mean, they just look down right into your garden area. It needs to be sort of private, so no windows. And there's all different kinds of versions of that. There's things called zigzag 0 lots, where the lot actually has a big Z in it, and it's got a 0 on one side and a 0 on the other side, but in between you have 2 yards that you can use. But it is sort of a unique situation. You don't see too many of those around though. What is this?
Multi-unit.
It's not multifamily.
You got 3 different lots, right?
Got 3 different lots.
Just be commercial.
Commercial. No,
Specific
these are all
use.
residential.
Specific. use.
0.
No, they're not zeros. This would be a townhouse.
Oh.
Townhouses could be right above against each other, and you can have rows of them. You can have 3, 6, or 7. You know, doesn't matter, but that would be a townhouse.
What's the difference between a townhouse and a condo?
You can turn townhouses into condos. Condos is just
Is it an ownership thing?
it's an ownership thing.
You can have a townhouse that you own and it's a condo.
I agree, yeah.
But on condos, you can do it where you can have multiple stories and people living on top of you,
Like apartments.
like apartments, except you can own that unit. And one other thing I'm gonna cover with these. This is a different type of construction that you would have with a duplex. When you have separate ownerships, a townhouse, there is a firewall that goes from the floor to the top of the ceiling. And in some ordinances, they actually go a foot above. So you have a barrier, you have a firewall. So if one of those units, like the middle unit starts on fire, you have a fire rating on each wall, so all three units don't burn. Your center unit would burn, give you a chance at least. Usually they call them a 2-hour firewall.
That's what I was, yeah.
Where, the fire department has basically 2 hours to get in there and fight that fire before it finally gets through that wall and starts on the next unit. And usually that's enough to stop it. But that's why you see a lot of duplexes. Now, if you have somebody that comes in here and they say, I want to build duplexes, and then I want to change them into townhouses in the future, you say, wait just a second. How are you going to construct that? If you're not going to construct it with that firewall in there, it's cost prohibitive to come back in here and put that firewall in. So get them to declare what, duplex, townhouse, 2 different animals. You got to treat them differently.
So duplex is no firewall?
You don't have to have the firewall through the attic,
Yeah,
stuff like
just a
that.
sheetrock.
Yeah. Planning and Zoning Commission basically has 3 options on a zoning case. They can approve it as submitted. They can approve a more restrictive district. Or they can approve with more restrictive rules in the case of a plan development. So you can actually, on a plan development, you can tack on other things as far as recommendations. And of course, one more thing I just want to point out, the Planning and Zoning Commission Board recommends to the City Council. So the City Council is the final authority on everything you do. The Planning and Zoning Commission cannot, and this is very important, cannot commit city funds to do something. Only the council has control of that. And so, somebody said, out there, the proponents is, well, will the city spend this and this on this project? Your answer is, they'll have to ask the council. We do not have that jurisdiction. Okay. So that's critical. The council, are you all council members up there?
Just us 2.
Just you two?
And then Pam here, Robin over there. I think that's it.
Okay. You control the purse strings of the city. Planning and Zoning Commission does not. You recommend projects, whether you think they comply with the comprehensive plan or make sense for the city. And of course, there are things you recommend on. And let me back up here just a little bit. On these things, what you can do, those 3 things are on zoning cases. We're going to get the plats pretty soon, but it's different. But you see down at the bottom there, you actually act on plats. Those are the things you act on. But plats are a little bit different. There's a little bit of twist. And it's a very important twist. And we'll get to that in just a few moments. One of the things I want to talk to you about is variances. Variances are a very specific topic. If somebody wants to do something and it's outside the ordinance and there's nothing there now, say I want to build a bigger building than one that your zoning ordinance allows, or I want to build it in the side yard setback because my house won't fit on this lot, that is not grounds for a variance. That's an imposed, hardship on you. So you're imposing that hardship. What a variance is used for is basically 2 different things that you usually use to see a variance. And by the way, your zoning ordinance here, when you look at your zoning ordinance, I was very proud of it. You have a very strong, basically anti-variance section in this ordinance that you currently have. But it just needs to be, followed to a T. It basically spells out the state law. And the state law, it spells out what variances are and how you can use them. But and good examples of a variance is, say we have these lots that were developed back 20, 30 years ago, 50 years ago, and then all of a sudden, TxDOT decides they're going to widen the road. They come out and they whack the front part of it off, and now your lot's
Your
Too
house is
small.
Too close to the.
or your house is too, or you just can't build on it. They've taken your functionality away from your lot. Well, that is grounds for a variance because somebody else, the state agency, impacted your lot and took your viability of your lot away. That is grounds for a variance. And this happens all the time. State highways get expanded and there's always lots facing them and they get lopped off. Another way that's good use for a variance is when you have a city, you have standards that you have in this book, and the city decides we're going to change those standards. And now you have this existing lot, and they virtually have made it, impossible to build on their based upon the new standards. That's grounds for a variance. I can't build on this tract of land anymore, and there's no vacant tracts around me. But now you're saying I have a piece of useless land. That is grounds for a variance. That's non-self-imposed. Somebody else imposed it on you. And that's where you need to use the variances. You don't use the variances to establish land uses. Don't use variances to approve something that's not allowed in that district. That's just not grounds for a variance. You also
So,
have,
for example, the planning and zoning, in that area, they wanted to put a mobile home and it's already on no mobile homes. That would not be a reason for a variance.
no, absolutely not.
Even if there's mobile homes on half the lots.
Even if there's mobile homes on half the lots. That's not grounds for a variance. Now,
I
if
think the
there's,
key word we're looking for is I want
yeah,
Well, and I see where, I think we talked about this the other day. So there's mobile homes on half the lots now, right? But let's say there's 5 mobile homes and there's 2 empty lots within the 8 or 7 lots there. 5 have homes on them, 2 don't. Well, at one point, those 2 that don't did, but then we've had a change in our ordinances or our zoning within the city for future planning, for future growth. So we changed that zoning. So once those mobile homes come off, they're not allowed to go back. Because if you don't do that, the city will never change. If you just keep saying, well, at some point there was no zoning and people placed mobile homes wherever they wanted to. And if we don't somehow put zoning in place to control that at some point, the city's going to continue being exactly what they were now, yesterday, and 30 years ago.
now if there's an area that you have that's zoned, for like single family homes and that's all. And every lot on there is mobile homes except for one. And you'd approve a variance for that, not the way you should, and you want people to have mobile homes there. Maybe you come back and zone that area for mobile homes. But if you want the change, like the councilman said over there, then you wouldn't. And there are some rules here that are in your ordinance right now. And I call them the 6-month rule. You have a use and it's abandoned for 6 months. It's not used for 6 months. You can't come back and start that up again. Whether it's a business, say you have a business in a residential zone. They abandon that business for 6 months. You can't come back after 6 months to start that business back up or another business in there. It reverts to regular zone. It's gone. That use is gone. It's terminated. Then you also have the 50%.
Can I ask
Damage
a
rule,
question
yes.
on it? So the logic behind it is you had a non-conforming use because you had whatever.
A business or
whatever
residential.
going on. Then you stopped it. During that 6 months that you weren't doing it, you basically lost that non-conforming.
That is correct. Correct. I'm glad you brought that up because I didn't really mention, I think that's up there, non-conforming uses. That's something that's very important. If you have if somebody or changes the zoning and the use that you have on the property is not what, it doesn't match up with the zoning, it's called a legal non-conforming use.
Like the mobile homes in the previous example.
Yes,
I mean, the people weren't breaking any law or any ordinance because the mobile home predated the zoning. So but it's a non-conforming use.
right. But you have a clause in your zoning ordinance, which is number E here on the bottom, which is brought into compliance within 10-year rule. According to your ordinance, you're there for 10 years and you don't change your use, it's gone. Anyway, pull that mobile home out and go. That's in your ordinance.
Hmm.
A lot of cities don't work that way, but it is in your ordinance.
So I'm sorry, I have a question. So I've had several calls for people that live in mobile homes, say it's a single wide. The gentleman got it from his dad. His dad passed away, he inherited it. He's been living in the home, but he wants to buy a brand new double wide and replace it. So, but the mobile home was there many years ago when it wasn't zoned for just single family. So now it's zoned for single family, but
He wants to replace that old.
Yeah,
Right.
he's still grandfathered in.
There's no such thing as grandfathered in though.
Hmm?
I mean, grandfathered in really doesn't.
Just for 10 years. But here, to answer your question, in the industrial code, it says that if you pull out a mobile home, an old mobile home, you can pull a new one in right behind it.
Yeah.
It's
So
not
like-
the industrial code.
What's that?
You said the
The
industrial.
Well,
industrial, it's part of Texas state law. It's not necessarily in the local government code, it's in another code.
But it supersedes any other code. So yes.
Yeah.
I was under the impression as long as it's completed, started and finished within the 6 month, that's removing the old home, replacing with the new one, and it's set up living in it, everything's going good. You have a 6 month period.
Yeah, you
there.
can, you pull it out, clean it up, the lot, whatever, and bring, put in the footings, you bring the new mobile home, set it down. You're good on that.
So,
You just can't bring the old ones in.
No, that-
No,
So-
no,
so the industrial code trumps the,
That goes back to the 6 month rule. It's not been 6 months since they pulled it out and put the new one in.
Right.
So that,
so it trumps the local government.
it's another law that.
Because it's Texas state.
Both of them are Texas state laws, but in the industrial code, it says you can do this.
There's a whole bunch of Texas laws that.
It's a little quirky.
You're talking about industrial code, or you talking about industrial zoning?
Not.
Okay,
not.
that may be where the confusion is.
Yeah, this has nothing to do with zoning.
So back to the question then of this individual that is living in a non-conforming use single wide and wants to replace it with what would be a non-conforming use double wide.
Yes,
So state industrial code says he can do it,
yes,
whereas our zoning law says he couldn't.
that's correct.
So,
but we're kind of letting that 6 month rule be the founding thing, is that he's doing that and taking care of it within that 6 months of, removing and setting it back up. So he's still, we kind of say he's grandfather. It's not really the right term, but it's a grandfather. He
Right.
already had permission for this.
But
And
what
he's
what she's saying
upgrading.
is she upgraded to a double wide instead of a single wide. Is that permitted?
Well,
And doesn't it also go how much space you have in that and all that?
yeah, and that's one of the things I'd have to check on for you,
Yeah.
just what you can do,
Okay,
how big you can expand.
right on.
Because if you look at another rule here, 50% damage rule, basically,
Right.
or actually the 25% expansion rule, is if you have, want to make some improvement, you have a house and say it's in a commercial area, you want to make some improvements on it. As long as it's not more than 25% of the value, you can do it.
Well,
what happens if it's more than 25%?
Can't do the improvements,
What happens after 10 years?
it goes away.
So that person in the double wide will have to move their double wide out?
So
Well,
I got a question.
Under your zoning ordinance.
On the 25% expansion rule, so
That was to me.
say we've got somebody that's got a big lot in town,
It's the only way you get
and
change.
they have a little bitty tiny house on it, and they want to put a bigger house on it. We don't want them to make it bigger than by 25%.
What's it zone? It's a zone.
Single family.
So
If you have a lot and it's own single family, and they want to make their single family home bigger, as long as it stays within the setbacks and everything, it's okay.
Okay, so these are within non-conforming use.
Non-conforming use.
Yeah.
Sorry.
they're already non-conforming.
Yeah.
Maybe
I
more,
forgot.
a lot of the problem that we have here in town, and this town's been around since what, 67 or something like that. This was originally a poor man's retreat. The blue collar workers in Dallas or whatever, the lots are real small. A lot of them in a lot of neighborhoods are so small, they'll only fit a cabin on it. I've got 4 lots across the street from me. Two in the front, 2 in the back. 2 of the lots front and back, one person owns. The other one, there's 2 different owners. And each lot individually is not big enough to meet the 6,000 square foot lot size to put a single family home on. And I guess that's where variances or non-conforming use.
Yes.
So if you build a house and you get a variance and you build a house on that, it's only good for 10 years. Then you
No,
gotta move your house on.
No, that's a different deal. That's a different deal. This is non-conforming uses. If you get a variance because there's a non-self-imposed hardship, that goes forever.
Oh, okay.
There's no time limit on it.
What's the 50% damage rule for non-conforming?
Okay, you have this house out here or something that's in the wrong district.
Okay,
It's struck by lightning or has a fire and it's damaged. If that damage is more than 50%, you can't rebuild it.
because it's a non-conforming.
Non-conforming use. That's the 50% rule. And pretty much A and D are the same. It was listed a couple different times there in the ordinance, but if you just can't discontinue a use and it's non-conforming, 6 months, you can't come back and restart that. And the whole purpose of this is to start bringing your city into compliance with ordinances and with your comprehensive plan, the direction you want the city to be. It's not like the city council say, we're gonna be mean. It's just that we gotta look at for the future, gotta have a vision of what the future is going to be for the city of West Tawakoni, and you go there. But if you say everything the way it is now can stay the way it is, then nothing will ever change. This is just a gradual thing. It's not an overnight, but it's gradual.
So E, what you were talking about before. So when was the zoning plan passed?
you talking about a master plan. I don't know when it was. It was years
That
ago.
zoning map was hanging on the wall.
Oh, it's
I think that
That's
was
not very old.
16.
16, I was thinking 13, but
I think the one on the wall is 16, but I might be wrong.
okay.
Okay,
It's not too old.
so 10 years from when it was passed is 2026.
Yeah.
yeah.
So in 2026, all of the non-conforming use cases, the city could send out a notice and say, per code, you have to.
That's a question for him there. Oh, I'm not sure about.
It
So-
depends on how aggressive you want to be.
So let's go back to the not so mythical neighborhood that's got 7 lots in it and 5 of which have mobile homes and 2 of which are standing empty. And say in 2026, we can force those people to move their mobile homes?
According to your ordinances.
Whether we would do that or not.
I'm just asking legally. I mean,
Okay.
I missed E because E was on my second page and I
Well, you-
only got to this page to read.
You gotta see where she's going, because you're gonna have some places that probably that might be a good idea to express that option.
Well, I'm just trying to find
Right,
out
but-
what our legal
Right.
spot is here.
And it would actually be
Whether-
27, because she said it was 17, but at the end of the day, there's probably some areas that have, that those houses, the person that owns them has never lived there. Right? And that's what happens in cities all around.
Yeah,
That happens
if
that way.
if you have absentee owners.
Well, all they do is rent. They're just slumlords.
Well, let me say something about absentee owners and, or the renters or people that live on the property. Zoning goes on the land. It has no relationship to who lives there.
Mhm.
And so if you live there or you don't live there, that doesn't matter. If you have something that's non-conforming, it's non-conforming whether somebody lives there or doesn't.
I was thinking more absentee owners, you approach an absentee owner, it's a little different than.
But, you know, on those things, when you get to the point,
And we're working on that.
I would assume you have a city attorney.
Right.
Ask them the question, how they are going to, if you want to pursue this. Maybe you do and maybe you don't. Because, you know, it's, when you start talking about people's property, it can be a volatile situation.
Oh, yeah.
And
Speak to your attorney.
and if you do, I would assume a city would need to enforce that kind of law consistently.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Say, I don't like these people over here, so we're gonna make them move out. These other people, we're gonna let them slide. Make everybody same.
Hello.
This-
We have access to the city attorney.
The P and Z usually
P&Z?
does not
No,
have
well, P
access
and
to
Z?
the
No,
council.
no, P and Z
Oh,
doesn't.
okay.
Because if, and
So
here's
if
the-
we have a question, we send it to the council goes to the.
yeah, and here's the reason why, is say if the P and
No,
Z
this
did,
council.
you have access to the council. Council is usually fairly expensive. They can say, can you investigate this? And all of a sudden, the city gets a bill for $10,000.
Mm.
And the council says, we don't have $10,000. Where does request come from? Didn't come from us. So,
That
no,
goes back to we can't commit city funds.
there you go.
Yeah, for those that looked at that, you know, I think you've looked at our zoning map, that's color coded and everything. When we put this thing together years ago, there's mobile homes all over the city. And what we did, we narrowed it down to 4 neighborhoods, and they're geographically symmetrically located. I think there's 2 up front, like on 276, and then there's 2 up back, which is Rabbit Cove, which is the longest road we have, except for 276. So there's only 4 neighborhoods that are zoned mobile home. And there was a reason for that, because we keep getting, you'll have a neighborhood where a mobile home would pop up, and it got everything. That was part of the growth project or idea that we had, was to narrow it from 7, 8, 9 different places down to 4, to where we got those 4 places that you can have a mobile home on. And it's on that map. If you haven't seen it, go out there and look at it. It is color coded.
And that's a good idea. Yeah, and one of the things I always tell cities, make provisions for everything in the world out there. Because if you don't make provisions for everything in the world, a court will tell you where you have to do it. And you don't want the courts telling you where you can have mobile homes and not mobile homes. So if you put a place, say, yeah, mobile homes can go here, they can go over here, but they can't go everywhere, that's okay. But if you have them, you know, if you don't do that, and you say no mobile homes there anywhere, the courts will tell you where you can put mobile homes. You may not be where you want. So
In their percentage, you're required to have mobile home, like 5% of your, or some percent that you have to have mobile home.
there's not.
You have to allow it,
I'm
or
aware of that you have.
like I'm not familiar with any mobile home districts in Rockwall, which is, you know, a small county, but
Well, there's a trick to it. And it's a trick that I've used many, many times, is you put mobile home parks where you can't put a mobile home park. In the zoning where you can't have mobile. In other words, a large portion of this ordinance here has to do with SOVs. Okay,
yeah, there is more than it needs to be.
that's good, except I would not have it in your zoning ordinance.
Sexually oriented business.
I would not have it in your zoning ordinance.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's like a section like this in here for that.
Yeah,
And the reason why I wouldn't have it in your zoning ordinance is because that's something that's gonna get challenged sometime in the future. And you don't want them throwing out your whole zoning ordinance because of that one section. And I guarantee you, it will be challenged. So,
Well,
you might want to consider, if we rewrite the zoning ordinance, is to pull that section out and approve that separate.
So that's where you come in.
yeah, exactly, yeah.
You got all that ready yet?
Wait a minute, you know,
All I'm saying, it's very dangerous to have it in that book.
Okay,
Larry and I are on the ARB. And mobile homes don't depreciate like they used to.
No, they
So,
don't.
and they're as expensive as homes now.
Mhm.
So depending upon what you get, You could have built a home on that site cheaper.
There's also a certain kind of housing that really doesn't get spoke of much, and it's called industrialized housing. And that it may look like a mobile home or a double wide, but it's not a double wide or a mobile home, but it looks like them.
The manufactured home.
Manufacturing.
Well, no, it's an industrialized housing.
Yeah.
But the reason
Bring
why-
them in in sections.
Yeah, there's been inspections all the way through on that. And they have a set of plans that go with it from the factory, and you cannot discriminate against those.
I was gonna say, you have to
They look
allow
like
those.
an
You have to allow
industrial
those.
building.
Now, the way you'll know it is there's a sticker on the back of that unit. Basically says industrialized housing, here's where it's made, this is where the plans can be found. And when they come in for a permit, for one of those things in a district, they need to have that set of plans with them. So it's not just like, I'm gonna take your word for it. No, you have a set of plans.
Yeah, refresh me on that color. When's it blue label?
Yeah, I thought they were multicolored. But anyway, that's where they are. I've seen pictures of them, but most cities don't really get those in abundance. Okay, anything else on that so far? And non-conforming uses, that's one of those things where when most cities, they adopt an ordinance, they go out and they take a photograph of all the non-conforming uses and they catalog them. Because unless you have an active building department where they're actually, or code enforcement, where they're going out there and looking at everything all the time, somebody could have slipped one in and everybody not know about it. It's easy to do. Happens all the time. Okay, subdivisions. It's something that, I looked at your zoning, or your subdivision ordinance, and it was done a long time ago, and it is in desperate need of being totally thrown out and replaced.
So she did get you a copy of that.
She got me a copy.
It's very old, I believe.
It's very old. In fact, it's so old, it was done on a typewriter.
Yeah, I believe that was the one from 87, if I'm not mistaken, 84.
At least there was a revision in 84. And remember, every 2 years, the state legislature meets and they change laws. And it's, let me put it this way, we'll get to it a little bit later, but there's a topic called rough proportionality. And of course, that wasn't even invented in 84, but it is now. And it's something that all these developers, they know about.
I don't even have a clue what that means.
I'll tell you here. It's about exactions that the city may get, like right of ways and getting to build roads and things like that. Well, it has to be roughly proportional to the value of the site, and it has to be prepared by a civil engineer report. That the city, has. And so those kind of things, it's mandatory. It's not like we should do it. No, it's mandatory. And so, as people start to develop and come in here, they're gonna say, well, that's not roughly proportional. You say, no, it's, you have to know. And, that's something that, is easily obtainable. You just have to have somebody prepare it. And once again, I show this map because that's the entire area where you can extend your subdivision rules and regulations out to.
Excuse me, I've seen on previous slides where the center is actually white and not green. Why would the center be white?
county.
It's in your ETJ. It's within a half mile of your city limits.
We don't own that. We don't have that as part of our city.
It's not part of your city limits. You have actually like a horseshoe on
We
it.
call it the
Yeah.
donut.
The what?
The donut.
Yeah,
Was there some reason that the city of West Tawakoni chose to draw the city limits?
it was
Oh, yeah.
done by mayor many, many years ago, and it had to do with alcohol.
Yeah, I was fixing to say it was liquor related.
Yeah.
Huh.
The mayor actually went door to door asking, hey, we're gonna put a liquor store up here. Do you want to be in or out of the city? I don't want it in the city. He said, go to the next one. And that's why this middle section is county. Would love to annex it, whoever want to annex, but right, I mean, annexation is an impossible feat now. It has to be voluntary. Am I correct?
Well, it doesn't necessarily totally, but that's virtually what has to be done.
Yeah.
It'd be nice to go to that far far right corner of that green on the bottom and just draw a line straight over to 276 and color all that green, be done.
Oh, it would definitely make things easier.
You have to annex that. See, you can't hardly do that no more.
You can't, it has to be
But you
voluntary,
have, people,
basically.
if somebody wants to be annexed, you can, you can surely annex them, but they have to be connected to the city limits. Their property has to be touching the city
They
limits
can't be
already.
in the
All
middle
the
of that
people
blue.
behind Scotty's wants to.
Oh, yeah, they'd love to.
Aren't they connected?
Yeah,
Mhm.
they are.
You know, there's definitely advantages to having your property in city limits. And there's really reasons why people should, yeah, there are property taxes, but there's also code enforcement. There's a zoning control. In other words, we've got this piece of property out there, there's no zoning control. So if I want to put a use out here, say, next to some of these residential lots right over here, something is the nastiest use you can think of, a rendering plant.
Yeah, a rendering plant, yeah.
Yeah, very, very nasty, and they stink to high heaven.
Mm.
Well, you can't stop it. So, if it was all in the city, you could stop them. You say, well, that's not according to our zoning. So you really should be in the city, and that would never happen. But here's what happens. I don't want to be in the city until something happens right next to me that's outside the city. Then all of a sudden, what are you going to do for me? The answer is nothing. There's nothing you can do. And so, it's dangerous, in my opinion, to be outside the city, but yet next to the city, no land use controls. And that's big. Now, the reason why this extraterritorial jurisdiction exists, let me go back to get back in the place where it was. Is that the theory is someday in the future, that will be part of West Tawakoni. So when development happens, the streets, the water lines, sewer lines, and everything like that, all the infrastructure meets your standards. So that when they come into the city, you don't have to replace everything. Because here's what happens one time. Okay, I got this subdivision right outside. They're just really fine and dandy. Now all of a sudden their infrastructure falls apart. Their streets, the county's not helping them with them. And they say, city, what are you going to do for me? If we annex it, will you improve our streets? Will you improve our water lines or whatever? You say, that's going to be quite cost prohibitive. We don't really want it at this point. But if it's developed underneath your standards, then the water lines are built appropriately. The drainage is right. The streets are built to a good quality. So you can say, yeah, we'll take you in. And so the theory is in Texas, this is not just the local area here. This is statewide. Is the areas out there you take care of so that when they do want to come in, they've met your standards and they've been built just like, not a variance from it, but just like the infrastructure that's inside the city limits today. And so you're protected that way. And so you get to extend them. Now, a lot of cities, they say, we don't really care about that. You just do whatever you want to. But it's a big mistake. You need to have jurisdiction. Now, back a few years ago, and I haven't investigated enough to know where you're at on that, but the state law came up. There was a new state law that said, because it used to be the cities and the counties took care of the plats in the ETJ. But the state law says, no, just one entity takes care of the plats. It's either going to be the city or it's going to be the county. And so most cities made an agreement, and the cities that I know of, they all want to take care of it because they want to control what's going to come into their city in the future, not what the county wants, but what you want. And I don't know if you guys have what you did, but this is back about probably about 6 or 7 years ago that law was passed. But we just need to check on that to find out if Hunt County has that jurisdiction or if you have that jurisdiction.
And Hunt County has, I wouldn't say fairly new. How old is our county P&Z? Larry or Bill?
Right.
Yeah, I don't know how old it is,
Long
but
time.
it's more mainly for, outside our ETJs. And they're usually they're, a commercial property or a big multifamily, not a multifamily, but multi-acres or whatever for single family housing and everything. This area in the middle of the city, I think all of them get water, the benefit of the city water. They are charged a different rate for the water rate than it would be in a city. And actually that difference, if you went and annualized it, it's about the same price as it would be if you were paying taxes.
Yeah, and that's generally the case.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. Because a lot of times, I don't know what your rates are, but a lot of times it's 1.5 times your city rate or 1.25 times. That's what the outside the city, rate is. You know what it is off? Right off?
There's only been a bit,
95.
very few of them have.
Outside water rates is $95.
Well, now what he's saying, the percentage, and I think it's not near what you just said. I think they're about 15% higher or something like that. It's not near as much. There's some cities charge 100% more.
Yes. And that's a real incentive. And here's a real incentive to them. I've got a nice house out here, on one of these lots here. My neighbor does not keep it up. His lot, he lets the grass grow, whatever. Well, cities can have codes that says, no, you go out there and mow your lawn. If you don't mow your lawn, we're gonna mow it and we're gonna put a lien on your house.
Well, the ETJ thing's probably a good thing for the city to start looking at, because how tight our city is. The center part of it, you can almost throw a rock across what is not city.
Yeah.
Figuratively speaking.
It's a better arm.
But I don't think very many people, if any of us, knew what ETJ was before you mentioned it. Maybe not in this meeting, but in previous meetings.
Maybe I just don't know what can we do as a city.
And I never even really heard the term spoken until you spoke at a previous meeting before. So I didn't know anything about ETJ and probably some here didn't. So this is all good stuff.
And there's one other thing about the ETJ, it's a half mile for the city of West Tawakoni, but you have other entities over here, small. You have another one over here in Quinlan that you can actually petition to be in a city's ETJ. In other words, if I live over here and I eventually want to be in West Tawakoni, I don't want to be over in this city. Then you can petition to have your property included in the ETJ. So your ETJ can grow past where your, by state law, it's mandated.
But what does the ETJ do for the city as far as code or zoning?
You get to control the subdivision, how that property develops. Okay.
So if somebody wants to build a development in the donut hole, assuming there's big enough, we control the.
So that's
how subdivided.
Big ass piece of property on that code.
No land use control, but subdivision control.
Yeah.
Now, there's one other part that I'm gonna mention, I mentioned a little bit later, and there's different kinds of plats, but one of them is a development plat. Basically, a subdivision is when you divide your property into more than one piece. But in the local government code, if you have a piece of property and you're going to develop it, you have to bring a development plat into the city. In other words, you still have some control, even if it's just a one lot plat that covers 100 acres, you still have control. But as you'll read later on, there's a provision in there that if you have a piece of property and you divide it in 5 acre tracts or larger, then you don't have to plat if there's no public improvements that are being done. And that's fine. That's just for transferring of property. But then say I have this 5 acre tract now, and I want to build on it, you have to bring in a development plan. It's one of those things we get you now or get you later. That's just the way it works. But you can, as a conveyance plat type, you can subdivide your property into pieces as long as they're bigger than 5 acres, every parcel. And the courts have set forth that we can do this. So it's nothing that cities are just dreaming up on their own. But you can regulate how development happens in your ETJ. You can do it for out in your extraterritorial jurisdiction and within the city limits. And once again, it's a broad for adequate streets, utilities, and planning. And what would used to happen, and I use this example is if I had a 100-acre tract, and this is the way it used to be, and I have a person, I want to sell just 1 acre. You know, it's no big deal. Pretty soon there's another person comes along, I sell him another acre. And I sell another acre. Pretty soon you have 100 lots out there, and it's a disaster. There hasn't been adequate streets, there's not adequate utilities and everything. So that's one of the reasons for this subdivision rules and regulations. It's not only to protect the individual, it's actually to protect the citizens, even the people in the ETJ.
I have a question on point 5.
Okay.
It says to ensure sanitary conditions and other governmental services.
Yes.
So within our ETJ, we have the ability to say, for example, you can't put in septic systems, you have to be connected to city sewer.
Well, that's one of the things that your subdivision regulations are so thin, it doesn't really cover that. A lot of city subdivision ordinances will say if you're within a certain distance, you do. Outside of that, you can have on-site sewage disposal.
Is that one of the things you noted in your red marks on the?
No, the red marks were for the zoning ordinance.
Oh, not the.
I chose not to mark up the other one because I didn't have a fat enough marker.
Okay, and since it.
A lot of those people in the donut hole, I think all of them have water in the donut hole, right? Well,
Yeah.
everybody's got water, but they don't have sewer. There's
In
Which area we talking
the
about?
center, in the
Center.
center of the city, the center that's all
Right,
county.
yeah, they have water, they do not.
Some have sewer.
some, a few.
A few,
Yeah.
Quail Run, certain parts of Quail Run.
But most of them.
I was just-
Once upon a time, all of these. had
I was
sewer.
just understanding what was included.
Yeah, and when you get to start having smaller lots, I don't know what Hunt County standard is it 1 acre for a house to have septic?
Yeah,
Yeah.
And you may find that's just fine. If you have a subdivision out there that has larger than 1 acre lots, I mean, that's okay. But if you start getting a lot of development, and they want to bring in smaller than that, then they have to be hooked onto some kind of sewage system.
Yeah, and then outside the city, they close to the lake, then you have to deal with this, all right? And they're pretty strict on septics around the lake. They don't lock them at all.
Oh,
they have so many
and-
feet you have to be from. the
Yeah.
In the RV parks, they just don't allow it anymore.
Yeah.
Now, is the ETJ, is that something that's already implicit, or is that something that needs to be started?
It's
It's
implicit.
automatic. It's automatic for the size of West Tawakoni, which is like 1,800 people. It's a half mile.
It goes in population up to, yeah, I think it goes in half-mile increments.
Yeah, well,
Up to 5.
Yeah, up to 5. Only the larger cities, the 5 is.
Yeah, that's yeah.
Of course, this is, and like I mentioned earlier, there's 2 sections of the local government code, 211 and 212. 212 here basically states when a flat's required. And so when you divide your property into 2 or more parts, and they're, one of them is under 5 acres, then you have to plat. There's no choice. You have to plat. If you don't plat and you have in your ordinance, it's a $2,000 a day fine. And so there's a real incentive. I used to be the assistant planning director for the city of Arlington. And we had people doing it all left and right. And we never collected 1 dime. And that wasn't the purpose of the penalty. It was to bring people into compliance. But I had a hammer out there. If they didn't comply, we'd tell our city attorney to go out there and file papers on it. I never had to use that. When you tell them $2,000 a day, that builds up rather fast, and they will lose. And so, as long as they're coming into compliance, I didn't want to collect a dime. I just wanted compliance.
Yeah.
And that's the way the city should be. You shouldn't be after fines and forfeitures. Just be after compliance, and it makes for a happier life.
That's a very important point.
I pointed out down here, greater than 5 acres. There's no public improvements that are required. This is just a copy of the plat. Another thing I'm working with that you would get, and this is where you break down what the lots look like, the street right of ways, and how they're gonna be built. And with this, there's a whole set of plans, civil plans, before they even get to this point. And these are the types of plats. There's a final plat or slash plat, preliminary plat, minor plat, replat, residential plat, which is a little bit different animal, and then the development plat. Under the residential plat, if you have an existing plat of residential subdivisions, or if it has deed restrictions or zoning, and somebody wants to go in there and change a section of it, you actually have to hold a public hearing. And so it's a little bit different. If it doesn't meet those qualifications, if it's, commercial land, it doesn't require a public hearing. Preliminary plats don't require a public hearing. Development plats don't require a public hearing, but that one residential plat does. And that gives the neighbors a chance to actually say, we don't want you to have that particular thing, especially if you're changing some of the conditions of the residential plat that everybody else was subject
You're
to.
basically talking about variance.
You would think so, but there's sometimes where it's not. Sometimes if you have a big enough lot and you just want to move this lot line over to here, and it's not really changing the density and stuff, then you're okay. It's not a variance. And this is sort of the process you go through. Say I'm out here and I have a tract of land. I want to submit a preliminary plat or have a pre-development plan before I submit a preliminary plat. Well, you can have that pre-development meeting and we'll let you know. Thank you.
Yeah, I can't take it. It's hot.
I start going like this, but anyway, you have your pre-development and you sort of spell out what you expect them to do. And I'm going to come to another thing in the slide pretty soon. It's going to have a big old red thing at the bottom. And so it's very important. I'll try to drive the point home several different times, but there's a thing called a 30-day. And that's the reason why you have this procedure. After you have a pre-development plan, then you come back and you have your preliminary civil plans. Now, within the civil plans, you'll have a document that will look just like a plat, what they're planning on doing, except there will be a note on it that says, this is not for adoption or approval or anything. This is just for a graphic idea of what we're thinking about, but the rest of the plans coordinate with that. So when you get to that point, once that's done, you can submit a preliminary plat and then you can act on it. But really, that preliminary plat has been looked at during the civil plan phase, the preliminary construction plan phase, because you're looking at that plan because the rest of the plans are all based upon that drawing that you can't approve, but yet you need it. So they come back in, they submit the preliminary plat, and then you can put that on the agenda, go through the process, and the council really doesn't need to look at the construction plans. You just need to look at the plans, because if the construction plans meet your ordinances, it's an administrative function, and it's not to be filled with. Of course, this process repeats itself with the final construction plans and then the final plat. Unlike zoning had 3 different options. Plats have 2 options. There's approval and there's denial. And you can approve as submitted, or you can approve subject to comments. But the reason why you put that note on the preliminary plat, the final plat, if you don't, there's this thing called a 30-day rule. If somebody submits a plat to the city, they say, oh, we don't want to look at this right now. They just put it in their drawer. After 30 days, it's approved. It's just like it went through all the different committees, all the different council. It could be a piece of junk, but yet it is approved.
That's a big deal.
That is a big deal. That's why it's big and red. Don't ever do that. If you've got a plat and it's submitted.
What starts the clock ticking on the
Application.
Hand the developer the application to apply?
No.
when they turn it
He
in.
turns it in.
Oh, he turns it in to the city.
Yes. And what you do is you have rules that are in place. This is one of the things that we really need to work on. When somebody submits a document like that, you get a hold of us and we're going to do a review within 10 days and say, no, you're deficient in all these things. Withdraw it now, or we're going to put it on this item right here and we're going to deny that levy. Because if you don't, it's approved.
Right.
And so it's a big, big deal.
Oh, yeah, I don't know what it is.
And I guarantee you that all quality builders, developers know this rule.
So,
Yes.
for example, the planning and zoning committee meets on
Before you say it, let me say one more thing. P and Z acts on it. That starts another clock of 30 days. So if the P and Z acts on it one day, it's 30 days from that day before the council has it.
Okay, so a developer comes in and submits the application or submits the documentation. It's the wires for the city, to the city. It's got to go to the planning and zoning committee, right? First,
Before it goes, yes.
before it goes to council.
Yes.
So say the planning and zoning committee meets on the first Thursday. So they come in and they submit it on the first Friday. So the planning and zoning committee wouldn't meet for
But-
29 days.
But here's what you do with the plats is you develop schedules. You'll not accept a plat that's outside of that 3-day window before the P and Z meets.
Yeah.
So if you have like, just for ease, if you have a P and Z meets on the 30th, that's just when it falls in the month. You'll not accept that plat before the 1st of that month.
So if you do the first Thursday in the month,
But what happens?
But what happens if they meet, what happens if somebody submits a plat the day after we have our meeting?
what he's saying is you can say what days only you will accept plats,
Okay.
so that they won't be.
Let me put it this way. We're gonna write a letter that says, if it's incomplete. There has not been ever one plat in my entire career, which has been 50 years in the planning business, but I can't find something wrong.
God.
Okay?
Wow.
If you really want to be a stickler, I can find something wrong. And I can reject that thing.
It's like an audit. There's,
But I see where she was going. She was talking about the perfect storm,
Yeah, yeah.
essentially.
yeah, I was just don't want, I mean,
Yeah.
I,
But
But he gave the perfect answer. You don't accept it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I get it, and that could happen, but the chances of it are happening, we probably should all go buy lottery tickets.
Yeah.
I'm
But,
I
guessing, I'm guessing.
Well, I mean,
That's not necessarily true.
encounter bad weather, ice,
So,
meet,
If
till
you
following month.
have a
Mhm.
schedule of when you'll accept the plat, and it'll go in front of the commission, and, that next week or in a few days,
Mhm.
and then it turns out there's no quorum, then it'd be like we dropped the ball, and then the council would have to be.
Yeah,
We've actually had that happen.
But
and
then,
we had to have emergency.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We've had to have emergency meetings too.
Yeah.
But an act, when he says act, it doesn't mean
Yeah.
approve or disapprove. It could be tabled, it can be reviewed.
No,
No, it can't table
We
it.
don't have
That
that
doesn't count as an act.
no, it doesn't.
Damn.
No.
So what does action actually
Approve or deny.
Approve or deny, we have to, one or the other.
and the default is if we don't do anything.
It's approved, yeah.
So that's what
That's why I say never table plat. If you table a plat, you just approve it.
Yeah.
But what my concern would be is if they submitted it to the city and the planning and zoning committee didn't meet.
But then that's where the council would have to have a special session meeting to actually review it and figure out what we're gonna do with it and get it over to BV or somebody.
or P and Z.
Well, if we did table it, we could always, plan to come back at a special meeting ourselves, right?
Well, it just depends on when your application deadline is.
Oh, I got
Yeah, it all depends, but to your point, Bill, you could say, hey, let's table this and
3 days.
and we're gonna have a special session meeting, and you're gonna have to set that meeting during that tabling. but you're tabling it obviously for an investigation reasons or whatever.
Right.
Yes,
Exactly.
absolutely. And we've done that. We've had to have a meeting within a
Yeah,
week of what we were tabling something. And we said, we're gonna have a meeting on said date, but we need to have a chance to revisit and talk about this
Right.
before we.
And that's all in Robert's
Just
rules
that-
of order.
I don't know
Yes,
if the
yes.
city has rules for when plats are accepted based on the dates that the council and the planning and zoning currently meet.
we haven't really, we haven't really run into that. I only know of one time that we, on 30-day rule, that we've actually had to approve it.
Yeah.
And I don't recall the details of it, but I remember it happening once. I don't remember it happening ever again, but, and I don't know if that's because.
Yeah, here's, if you have somebody out there that really wants to work with you, say, like we have a P and Z scheduled for a day, and you come up and there's no electricity like last year for a week. What we would do is call the developer and say, we're not gonna have a forum. And so what's gonna happen is we're gonna ask you very nicely, to withdraw your plat and resubmit it. And then we'll put it on the next, available agenda. And something like that, you would say, and we'll call a special meeting, make it earlier so you don't have to wait so long. And they'll go with you because they can't get to the meeting anyway.
Yeah.
So there are those things that you say the perfect storm that do happen, but most people, if they really want to work with you and are quality type developers, they'll work with you.
I would hope that.
And then they're denying, does it deny like
No.
complete, or it can be denied now, depending upon other.
We don't make the decision. We can deny it, but then council can say, yeah, but we like the idea. We're gonna pass it."
And you just recommend,
What we say doesn't.
and there's a lot of, there's a lot of things like this second one, and approve subject to comments. Say, we have
don't
a
think
whole
that's
string of
happening.
comments regarding the plat,
No.
and they haven't had the chance to make the corrections, then you can approve it subject to those things. But plats are an administrative function. Once the plats get to you, there's no reason you should deny it. Unless they just said, no, we want to take our chances with the council, then you can deny it. And I would recommend every time they do not agree with the staff comments, to deny it, because the staff comments should be based upon your ordinances. If they're not based upon your ordinances, we have no grounds to make that comment.
Right.
But if they met all our rules and regulations, there's no reason to deny the plat. No matter what we say, so we just really don't like it. That doesn't matter. You have to approve it if it meets all the rules.
Yeah. And I think we've been pretty cohesive, except for one thing, since I've been in council. We turned a yes, I think, to a no, since I've been in council. So we've been pretty cohesive with the P and Z since I've been here, I think. Had one thing that I think P and Z approved in the council discipline. But that was actually zoning. I think that was actually a trailer house.
Yeah, and that can happen. That's not necessarily unusual with plats. If that's meets all of the standards. And it goes through the planning and zoning commission, it still meets all the standards when it goes to the council. So it should be, you almost call it a rubber stamp, because it meets all the criteria. You just can't arbitrarily add new criteria.
And this is much different than a site plan or,
Site plan, you can change all day.
yeah. Which is, that's where you've actually got the building or house or whatever it is you plan on putting it on the plat, I guess, and outline what the setbacks and everything else is, and that's where the rubber meets the road, is it not?
Yeah, and really, one of the things, you have your plat. Before you issue any building permit, you need to have, it needs to be on a plat of lot. And so you know what your setbacks are. You know, at the front yard, it's 25 or 15 on the side that's to a street, and 10 interior. You know all those things. So when somebody, I'm getting into a little bit of the building world, is when somebody submits a drawing for a house, they also, after they put up their, and it's approved, and before they put up their stakes out there and they put up their form boards, there needs to be a survey done that shows where those form boards are. I can take you to a city right now where that wasn't done, and they built in the city right away, 10 feet of their house. And I gave them some options, what they need to do, and none of them are really pretty. But if you have form boards, it's just a matter of taking a hammer, knocking them down and moving the form board and get the house where it's supposed to be.
Yeah, we had one, we've got we call it the clusters over here off of just behind Dollar General. And our setback is 25 foot. Well, they met the setback 25 foot, but the road that they on this setback is a major artery to the city. So it's a very heavily traveled road. And in a case like this, the setbacks need to be different along a main road like that. It should have been 50 foot rather than 25 foot, because you could easily it's from here to that wall. That's how far it is from the road to the building. And it's not far enough. It needs to be 50 foot. And then we need to have that reflective in our zoning plan.
Yes. And that's one of the things that I've done in a lot of cities. I go back and have them adopt what they call a thoroughfare overlay plan, which has different standards up and beyond the zoning standards. And one of them is a 50-foot setback, with increased landscaping requirements along the major corridors. Because that's your appeal to the city, as people drive through, your curb appeal. What do they see when they go through the city? It needs to be something nice. And if you build really close, you feel like you're in a tunnel.
Yeah.
And it's not as well received. Yeah. Okay, but anyway, 30-day rule, very, very important. If you have any questions about that later on, give me a call. You almost just have to be really specific and spot on that. Or you'll get in trouble. Okay. Enforcement. You do have enforcement on your subdivision rules and regulations. And it's in state law that you have these things that you can do. And so, if somebody gets out of line, you can take care of it. And then what you've all been waiting for, there's a rough proportionality, I almost skipped over it that we talked about. We sort of covered that earlier. That's where if you're doing development and you're trying to get more exactions out than what is normally acceptable, then you need to have your engineer look at that and make sure that you're not trying to get more than you need. For example of this, say I go back to a map real quick here. Say I have a development we got here in the ETJ, and they need a water line out there, and you want to have an 8-inch water line or a 10-inch water line put to them, because that's what you need to service them and other people and beyond. Well, they may only need a 6-inch line, really services. Well, you're exacting more than what's really necessary for them, and so there's an overreach. And if you have a case like that, sometimes the city would pick up that extra cost and pass that on through different ways that you can do that. But you can do those types of things. You just can't charge them way up and above. You say you got to build a freeway out to your property when a freeway's not really necessary.
Oh, yeah.
And so those things are over and beyond. And so the engineer that you have to do is say, this is not good. You're exacting more than what the project merits.
Yeah.
So very important. And then the most favorite part of everybody's
You didn't go to the enforcement part, but I guess I could.
Yeah, it's in there. And it's one of those things where if you don't plat your property right, there's fine things that you can do. You can get $2,000 a day until you make improvement. But once again, I'm not after
I think
fines.
looking up the utilities is probably pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. That's right.
Anyway, it's really not to punish, it's really just to bring people into compliance.
It is. It is. You have these rules and you want your city to grow orderly. But if somebody doesn't want it to grow orderly, they want to just do what they want to do, you gotta put boundaries on it and say, well, you need to come into compliance. This is what you're doing.
Painters all over.
That's actually the same thing we do with land.
They can use, yes, they can't make a move.
Indefinitely.
Yes.
Entertain a motion to put this man on.
For about
like 7.
If we get rid of it.
The planning and zoning.
I don't have a federal jurisdiction.
You did,
We do.
okay.
So
What
here's
about-
I'm probably
the deal.
qualified. I'm probably
The back of
qualified
it is
to
RV,
jurisdiction because I was
okay,
looking
and
at
front
your
is
average
commercial.
age in
Storage containers are
West Walker.
considered an
And
accessory
compared to the
building.
state average,
They
state
have to be
average
behind the main building.
of a
Cannot be
person
an
is
accessory
36.
building to a
That's the
building that
average
does
age.
not exist.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
still
Western
can't have
Market is 50.2.
Be careful. Be careful.
So
What about-
I'm
what
in
RV?
below that range, so.
it. They have to be behind the main building. They have an end. And I found a permit fee.
Oh,
She's not
Bill,
qualified.
you better just keep your listen. Listen, she's been giving me a hard time. Now, I got a question. Is this the time that she's supposed to tell us who she's buying lunch for?
Oh, no, he's not. I do have a quick question. We have property, we don't. There's an individual that has a plat here for property. He owns, the family owns from 276 back. The very back, very small portion of it is county. The question came up yesterday, this person wanted to divide it pretty much down the center. The family owns one part, wants to sell the other part off. He doesn't think he needs to replat it. Off the top of my head.
I'm wanting to say 3 acres if it's who I'm thinking about, and it's frontage roads. I think there's 200 or 300 foot of frontage road on that.
I mean, on our map out here, I mean, you've got to say, this is the property. Of course, it's long. And I mean, this back part, this little bitty back part is what is considered county. This family thinks it's the upper, it's pretty much cut in half. They think it's county, which it's not. But they think they're kind of beyond, having to get it replatted. I'm like, if you're gonna sell that, it needs to be 2 plats at that point. Family A owns A and family B owns B.
Under 212.004, it says, who divides a tract into 2 or more parts? Are they dividing the tract into 2 or more parts?
Yes.
By report?
So that you plat 1 for one family, plat 2 for family.
Yeah, it could be the same document, but it'll show 2 different lots.
Okay. But that's what I read and I was understanding that they have to, divide, but that one plot or that one plat would be 2 plats at that point.
No, it'd just be 1 plat. It'd be like, how are they divided? It'd be, whatever subdivision name, lot 1A or 1 and block A and lot 2, block A. Something like that. One document. You don't, if you have a plat, you're gonna plat this property and then plat this one. If you plat this one by itself, you're subdividing without the end of the plat. But if you have them both on the same piece of paper, you're not. So it needs to be on the same piece of paper where they're dividing one tract of land.
And the new owner, after it's platted, the new owner doesn't resubmit a plat that's already on file. They just need to submit a site plan.
Yeah.
Is what they do.
Yeah, the site plan, if this is a commercial.
Once it's divided, legally divided by survey, then it goes to site plan, right?
When it's legally divided by plat.
Yeah.
So we can plat, what was that, ETJ? We can't? Because some of her property was on county, not on our sizes.
But it's within the ETJ.
Yeah,
Yeah, it isn't, if it's within that whole bigger area that I showed,
yeah.
and you've extended your rules out to that area,
Uh-huh.
then you have jurisdiction inside and outside the city.
Cool.
So you do have to actually do something to extend your rules out to that area.
Yeah, this is something.
So it's not implicit.
It has to be in our
The
subdivision.
rules. Yeah, it has to be in your subdivision.
And which ours is coming back to 84, so that's one of the reasons I invited him to come down here. We spoke a couple of months ago or whatever. We brought BB in back in November, I think. Not for this, but it was for something else. And the more we talked to him, we found out that everybody there has got, 20, 30, 40 years experience in their field, and they're experts. They have a guy that's an expert in fire. He's a fire marshal, fire inspector. He knows every rule and regulation there is. He's been to school. He's been doing it 20, 30 years. You've got him that's had all this experience. Lawrence's background is pretty
Building
broad.
inspections.
Yeah.
Main thing.
What is it?
Plan review and building inspection.
Okay, yeah. So each one of them brings something to the table that we've not seen before. We got to noticing after we were talking, we don't have a subdivision plan, and that's like the most important thing the city needs. That's the thing we need that we're lacking. So that's why I wanted to bring somebody down for a class, and I expect that we're gonna do this a couple more times, not over the same material, of course, but to give everybody a better understanding. For instance, I was on the P&Z for 6 years or something like that. There were no classes. I didn't know where to go for resources. So I came out of it after 6 years, just as dumb as I was when I went in. I mean, literally, until I got involved with what I'm doing now, I had little to no knowledge at all. And since in the last year, I've gained a lot of knowledge and understanding of this. And that's why I wanted everybody to attend and participate in this, because this is our city. It's going to be what we set it out and plan it to be. In years past, you could literally come down here and build anything you wanted, wherever you wanted. It didn't matter. And they still do it. People will come down here and start something. And I didn't know you had to have a permit. It happens almost every week. Every week there's somebody coming in.
Actually, I could actually kind of add to an example and then actually get a personal question answered at the same time. And that's because I just moved here, so
Okay.
I'm still figuring out my area. And the last two places I lived, I did have a mother-in-law spot for my mom. And especially now at my age, it's even more critical than ever to get that prepared. And then when I bought the property, and I read through the homeowners association, and everything else, it says right there, you can have an outbuilding up to 600 square feet. I'm like, I can make that work. So am I legal to build a mother-in-law suite as a separate building on the lot? Or would I have to attach it to my house to make it 800 square feet? I know that's getting a little bit more into the details, but.
There's an HOA laws or rules are pretty strict. I mean,
Yeah, well, here's the thing about HOA rules and regulations. Start off, the city does not enforce them. Whatever they do, they do. The city only enforces their regulations that's in the subdivision and in the zoning laws. And so you'd want to look at both things. What they allow, just because they allow it doesn't mean necessarily mean the city.
Right. Or vice versa.
Or vice versa.
yeah.
The thing of it is, though, if you build something outside of HOA rules, we're not gonna care. That's up to them. They'll probably sue you, or to bring you into compliance, but the city is not. Now, if you do something that's outside the city rules, yeah, that's a different story.
And I'm sure somewhere that it's written down based upon the size of your lot, you're allowed to build so many square feet.
Yeah, and particularly your setbacks too, you just gotta make sure you meet all the different criteria.
Well, I got lucky. I actually got a pretty big lot for my area, so, but it'd be rather disheartening to know that I couldn't build another lot unit.
I have a question. How long does it take to usually develop a subdivision plan?
Like, an ordinance,
Yeah. Subdivision ordinance.
How long?
not that terribly long. It depends, because, when I
You're
develop
saying
it,
we need it,
Yeah.
I'd like to see it happen.
I have to tailor it to your community, because there's a lot of things, the way your community operates, that's different from every other community.
Right.
And so, it'd probably take maybe 2.5 to 3 months to get it all
Oh, wow.
started, developed and done, and adopted.
Yeah. And that's one thing that we're gonna, as a city, we're gonna have to look at that. I mean, we can't continue to grow like this, like we're expecting, until we have these things in place. Because all we're doing right now, we're just asking for lawsuits. I mean,
I think that's a great idea that you developed that. Also that most people in today's world, they can't afford a site-built house. I'd like to see the city look into other areas that we can just go ahead and zone for mobile homes or develop those or rezone some of these areas that are filled full of.
well, we kind of did that when we redid what the new zoning map that you see. We did that back in 2014, 2016, 17, something like that is when we went, that's when we redid that. And we can have it, we can have others print it off. I forgot who did it for us, but you know, once we change them, but there are 4 places for mobile homes, but in reality, there's mobile homes all over, you know. I'll be glad to show you on that map. Do you have a color-coded map like that? If not, we need to get you one. Huh?
I have a copy. It's small, so you have to really get magnified.
Yeah, but we got a big blown up version here on the other side of this wall.
Same one I got.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be the same one.
Just know they misspelled Tawakoni.
Did they really? I didn't even notice that.
It's right. I had my magnifying glass to look at it. I said, because I was typing, you know, O-N-I, and I said, it's got I-N-I. I said, what? So I went back and checked all my documents to make sure I didn't make it.
I like it. Tawakoni.
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 Morris, I really appreciate you coming out with us today. Has everybody got any more questions or anything? I'm sure, like most, if you're like me, my questions are gonna come tomorrow or next week. You know, it's just the way I am, but we'll be in touch with each other, you know, with the VV. And they've been a great asset to us so far. They're the ones that were instrumental in dealing with the wagon wheel like we wanted. That was one of the things whenever we incorporated or brought them in on the contract was we needed some help doing some things that we didn't know how to do alone. So Lawrence, which is he a manager or, I mean,
He's a business development manager.
Okay. He came to us and we had a proposition and it was just perfect. And they've really been helpful in taking care of some of these things. We want to see the wagon wheel go. We don't necessarily want to see the building gone. We want to see the clientele go. That's what we need out of here. And I hate to say it like that, but it just is. The Wagon Wheel's a hotel that's a short, long-term stay, and it's just full of drugs. And they don't have a CO. They fly by the seat of their pants. Lawrence will be able to tell you about his inspection was unbelievable. There's no way the guy could fix it financially and brought up to standards the way it's supposed to be.
It would cost at least half of the income he brings in a year to fix it,
Yeah,
at least.
yeah.
Like plumbing needs a complete overhaul, electrical's really bad. You could actually stand on one of the rails and reach out and grab a live wire,
Yeah.
that kind of thing.
So, but anyway, they've been real supportive. They've helped us in many ways. And we're going to continue this relationship because it's what we've been missing for years. I mean, it just, and all it was a phone call. We made a phone call. They also service Quinlan, East Tawakoni, Emory, maybe. I don't know. I mean,
we service 240 cities in Texas.
Yeah.
And here, can I just talk a
Yeah,
little bit about
yeah, you bet. Yeah.
Bureau Veritas is a company we've been in business since 1826, so we've been around the block a couple times. And the company started in the shipping business. But we have 78,000 employees. Not that many in Texas, but you know, our Texas employees just stay. We're divided in a couple regions and stuff. Except for what I do, I'm all over the state. But where we benefit a lot of smaller cities is a lot of cities, you know, they'll hire us and not use us, which is fine until that project walks in the door. We're a phone call away. Can you come in and help us? Because there's no charging or anything until you need us. And then for most everything, except for my services, there is, you charge the builder, and those from the fees that you charge the builder or the developer, you get, you make money, and then that's how we're paid. So it's not like a burden on the city. And if you would hire staff like what we have on our, it'd be cost prohibitive, but we have all the expertise. We do, like I say, small cities, but we also do all the plan review and the inspections for like the new ballpark in Arlington. All those inspections for that. We do inspections for Amazons and, facilities and Michaels and hospitals and schools, plan review, and also the inspections. And so we've got the expertise for everything and all the certifications. And yet once again, you don't have to hire a bunch of staff for a project, and then when that project's not there anymore, you have to fire them. You only use us when you need us. And so we're just sort of sitting there in the background and you're just waiting for your phone call.
Do you do anything with the county,
Do I do things?
with counties?
We do work with some counties.
Because this is a fantastic, I'm on the county, and this is a fantastic class, and I would like to introduce this at our next meeting. He's on the county also. But I think this is great, don't you?
Yes, I do.
It really helps out.
Yeah, and like I say that I really foresee some other additional stuff down the road as we each of us will probably leave here today. We'll have a question. Everybody go look through their books or whatever. There may be some notes. I want everybody to take notes of any questions or whatever. And let's bring them up. Let's move. We need to move forward. Right now, we're just spinning our wheels, especially with no subdivision ordinance. We looked, and I guess Annette probably found one. Our book of ordinances was 87. And that's just it's not right for the citizens either.
Well,
And it makes it hard for business people or potential business people to come and figure out what the rules are to.
Well, yeah, because
play by.
there's not even anybody here. If you were to walk up to Cody and ask about something specific, she has to go look it up. Well, where she goes to look it up at, it's just paper. You have to go through each page to find something. We don't have anything readily available. We don't have an opportunity to put a search bar and type a keyword in there to pull up something.
No, trust me, I've tried
We're-
100
no,
times.
Well, that's why my
Yeah, we're working on that right now. We're working on it to do that. I haven't really publicized it because we're not as far along as we'd like to be, but
Okay.
yeah, so we're working on that. We're getting to that point. It's just, things just take us time,
No, I've done a little website development over the years. I just, of course, looked at the city when I first.
Yeah, you don't
got
wanna,
this, and I was like,
yeah,
I
nah.
spent about 2 minutes there and said, this will do nothing but waste my time.
We're getting ready to change it, We're working on it. And we're just as
And I'm
frustrated
more than
as
happy
you
to
are.
help with that.
Okay, we're just as frustrated.
Well, one of the things I do besides work with zoning ordinances, subdivision ordinances, site plans, and reviewing them and stuff like that, I do GIS stuff. Like, I didn't have any maps of Tawakoni, West Tawakoni, so I drew these.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Wow.
all these maps.
Thank you. You're gonna.
I could have shown you an easy way to get
Well,
it.
and that's why these
With
maps,
that
I
outline on
didn't
it.
have time, because there's no street names on here, because they're incomplete. But it's really interesting, when you look at the map, because, there's this line right here, but you look up here, there's these white spaces before you get to city limits. But there's another line out there that I didn't put on these maps, it's the floodplain.
Yeah.
And that's what those are. Those are little floodplain areas that
Yeah.
surround the
Well,
city.
like, for example, the business that my husband and I own, we lease Sabine land. It's like the end of that peninsula. Okay, that green peninsula. That's, we're in the floodplain. Totally.
Like I said, this doesn't reflect it, but it just reflects the pool level. That's where the blue is, the pool level.
Yeah. All right, well,
So this is the annual fee. This is 3 times each. So their initial fee is 3 times the annual fee plus the annual fee. So their initial fee would be $200 and then $50 a year after that per container.
for commercial use. and when there's no residential.
No residential or RV.
So,
So commercial can have it, but they have to have permits. They have to put a fence around it or evergreen. It has to be earth tones.
sit,
Can we turn the recording off?
yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know how to do it. Don't want me to do it.
That's all, folks.
I appreciate it, Morris. I really do.
so I was asking her on the mother-in-law. units, about put out.
Nothing about it.
So do they have to be built on, the same state?
Yeah. everybody has a
The same
different
what?
State,
What do you mean?
Texas. Can I put my mother-in-law?
Oh, yeah, no joke, no joke. Sorry, you guys have to look at me. There's a better looking face than that.
Okay.